Nico. Her voice had gone somewhere I had never heard it go. The one thing, 20 years ago, the thing Greco caught you doing. She wasn't blinking. I need you to tell me it isn't what I have just this second realized it is. Empire of Ashes. Episode 15. The Oldest Debt. Written by Mia. Lena. It's Nico, I said. I watched it hit Dario the way I'd known it would. Not like a fact. Like a bereavement. He didn't argue. He'd been married to me long enough to know I don't go still over a feeling. But his whole body went to the place a body goes when it's been told that someone is dead.
Tell me the math, he said. Horse.
Don't tell me it's Nico. Tell me the math and let me find the hole in it. So I told him the math, the way my father taught me, clean and merciless, because the kindest thing you can do for a man who doesn't want to believe a number is show him every digit until he can't. 4 people had access to that study. The housekeeper can't read a balance sheet. She could have known I was in the room, not what I found in it. The doorman is new and Greco-vetted, which makes him the obvious answer, which is exactly why he is in it. Greco doesn't put his own plant somewhere this visible. A vetted man is a man everyone watches. Sophia knew I was working the books, but Sophia can't get at the drive. She'd know I touched something, never what. I made myself say the last digit. But the drive, Dario. The air-gapped drive. The one thing in that room that knows precisely which files I opened. And when. One person built it. One person set the architecture, holds the keys, could read its logs without leaving a fingerprint, and would know, to the hour, the moment I found $140,000. The cruelty of it landed on my own tongue. Nico built that drive himself. To keep Salvatore's secrets from ever leaking again, he built the one window in this house that only he can see through. And 4 days ago, Greco looked through it. Dario tried to find the hole. I let him, you have to let them, or they spend the rest of their lives believing the hole was there, and you just wouldn't look. He said maybe Greco had the room wired from outside. I'd swept it twice, and Nico's own architecture would have caught a wire before I did. He said maybe the housekeeper had photographed a screen. The drive logs would show a file opened, not a number understood, and Greco hadn't only known I was in the books. He'd known the exact account, the exact night, the spider feeling the exact fly. He said maybe it was a coincidence of timing, and then he heard himself put the word coincidence in a sentence about Vittorio Greco, and stopped. There was no hole. I'm sorry, there was no hole. I've spent my whole life wishing the numbers would lie, and they never have. Not once. Not even when the truth they handed me was the man who taught my husband how to be good. Nico raised me. It tore out of Dario. When my father was teaching me to be him, Nico was teaching me not to be. He's the reason there's anything in me at all worth you marrying. You don't understand what you're saying. I could have told her the specifics if my mouth had worked. The time I was 9, and my father made me watch a man be disciplined in the cellar, and afterward it was Nico who found me being sick behind the boathouse, and didn't tell anyone, and didn't call me weak. Just sat on the cold dock with me until I could breathe, and said, "The day that stops making you sick is the day you've lost, and your father lost it before you were born, so don't you dare lose it too." 20 years of those. Nico teaching me which of my father's lessons to take, and which to let pass through me like water. Nico at my mother's funeral, the only one who cried, the only one Salvatore let cry, because Nico had earned the right to grieve the things Salvatore killed. If you'd asked me, an hour before my wife said his name, to list the people in this world I knew the way you know your own hands, I'd have put Nico above my own dead mother. That was the math I was trying to find a hole in, not the drive, the man. I understand it exactly. I said it as gently as I have ever said anything. I'm saying the person who loves you most in this house is the one who carried your wife's secret to the man who wants to drown her. And I'm saying both of those things are true at once. I know they can be true at once, Dario. I'm the woman who married you to destroy you. My father sold his soul to the devil out of love. You hid a murder from me out of love. I have spent this entire marriage learning that in this city, the people who love you are precisely the ones positioned to betray you, and that the betrayal and the love are usually the very same act. I took his face in my hands. So before we go to Nico with knives, I need you to consider the thing I've already considered. That he didn't do it to hurt you. That he did it for the same reason everyone in this whole rotten story does everything. And that if we walk in there as executioners, we will never learn what it was. We didn't ambush him. Dario wouldn't, and I didn't want to. You learn nothing from a cornered man except how he fights.
We did the harder thing.
Dario sat down across from the man who raised him in the kitchen at the hour we'd all started keeping and set a glass in front of him and said, Lena found the leak. It's the drive. It's you. I need you to tell me it isn't. And I need it to be true because I have exactly one of those two things, and I'd give the whole empire for the other. And Nico, 50-odd years old, gray and careful, the closest thing to a father either of us had left in that house, looked at the glass and didn't touch it and didn't insult us with a denial. That was the worst part.
He didn't even try.
How long have you known? He asked. To me, not to Dario. He couldn't look at Dario.
Since this morning, I said.
You're faster than your father was. Nico's voice was very even, the evenness of a man who has rehearsed a confession for 20 years and is finally, almost gratefully, getting to give it. Aldo took 8 months to find what you found in 4 days. I always wondered which of you it would be that did it. I hoped for a long time that it would be neither. He still hadn't touched the glass. I understood, watching him, that he'd known this kitchen was coming for 20 years, that a man who builds the only window in a house knows, every single day, that one day someone faster than the last person will look at the window and understand who's been standing at it. He'd lived inside that certainty so long it had worn smooth. There was no panic in him. There was something almost worse, relief. The specific, terrible relief of a man setting down a weight he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it had edges, even knowing that setting it down would cost him the only family he had. Ask me whatever you're going to ask me, Nico said to Dario, quietly, and then do whatever you're going to do. I've spent 20 years earning every version of it. I won't make you feel cruel for any of them. His voice almost held. That's the last thing I can still do for you, and I'd like to do it, if you'll let me.
Dario.
I have been shot. I'll put that next to this, for scale. 26 years old, in an alley behind a restaurant my father owned, and it hurt less than sitting in that kitchen watching Nico decline to deny it. 20 years, Nico said, when I finally made myself ask. Greco has owned me 20 years. Since before you were old enough to shave. Before your mother died. He turned the untouched glass a quarter turn on the table. He didn't recruit me, Dario. I want you to understand the shape of it before you decide what I am. He caught me. One time. One thing I did a long time ago that he made certain he could prove, and I could never undo. And every year since, the price of him not handing that thing to the city has been the same. I tell him what he needs to feel safe about the Marchettis. Not everything. The minimum. Enough to keep him patient. He turned the glass another quarter turn. You have to understand what that bought before you decide what I am. Salvatore died 8 months ago, insolvent, exposed, a corpse holding up an empire. The single most tempting moment in 40 years to move on the Marchettis, and the strongest Don in the city already had a hand inside the house. By every law of this place, Greco should have taken you that week, Dario. Carved you up before your father was cold. His eyes came up. He didn't. You've spent 8 months wondering why the wolves circled and never bit, and telling yourself it was your own cleverness. It was me. Every week I fed Greco just enough to make him feel like he already owned you, because a thing you already own, you don't have to kill for. I bought you 8 months with the only currency I had. Your secrets. A little at a time. He didn't look away. I'm not telling you this so you'll forgive me. I'm telling you so you'll understand the price was real, and I paid it knowing exactly what it made me, and I'd pay it again to have gotten you even this far. He finally looked up. I have spent 2 decades being the reason Vittorio Greco never once moved on this family. Because a man who has a window into your house doesn't need to burn the house down. I sold you in small pieces, Dario, to keep anyone from taking you all at once. I told myself that made me your protector. His jaw worked. Lena will tell you what it actually made me. She's the only one at this table who'll say it plainly. It made you a man who loved someone in this city, I said. I'd learned the sentence from my wife, and got caught at it. But Lena had gone very still. The other stillness, not the arithmetic, the one I'd seen exactly once before, in a kitchen with a blood-stained ledger lying between us. Nico. Her voice had gone somewhere I had never heard it go. The one thing, 20 years ago, the thing Greco caught you doing. She wasn't blinking. I need you to tell me it isn't what I have just this second realized it is. Nico looked at her then, for the first time all night. The man who raised me, looking at the woman I'd married, and something passed between them that I was not part of. A grief with a shape I didn't yet understand, and was about to. 20 years and 3 years aren't the same number, I said, because my mind was still trying to keep the math in its lane, still trying to protect me from the sum my wife had already reached. Whatever Greco caught Nico doing 20 years ago, it can't have anything to do with. He didn't catch Nico 20 years ago and again 3 years ago, Lena said, not looking away from him. He caught him once, 20 years ago, and then 3 years ago, when he needed a careful man for a careful job, he called in the whole 20 years of the leash all at once. Her hands had gone flat on the table. Didn't he, Nico? The night my father died. Greco needed someone inside the Marchettis to get close to Aldo Russo. Someone Aldo would trust enough to get into a car with. Someone who could make a brilliant, careful, frightened accountant believe, right up until the water, that he was being driven somewhere safe. The kitchen was very quiet. The hour the city does its real business in. I've spent 3 years hunting the man who killed my father, Lena said. And I married into the house that did it. And I sat across the dinner table from the man who ordered it. And I have just now, in this kitchen, finally understood that the man who drove my father to the water, the last face Aldo Russo ever saw, the hands that... Her voice did not break. I have never loved her more, or been more frightened of what was standing behind that steadiness. And I understood, in that suspended second before she finished it, The trap the whole city had been building around me my entire life, finally sprung in my own kitchen. I was sitting exactly halfway between the two people who'd made me. The man who taught me how to be good, and the woman who'd given me something worth being good for, and one of them had killed the other one's father. There was no version of the next 60 seconds where I didn't lose something I could not live without. My father would have known what to do. Salvatore never loved two things at once in his life. It's the only reason he died in a bed. I'd made the amateur's mistake. I'd let myself love more than one person in a city that prices love precisely by how much it can cost you, and Greco, who prices everything, had found the exact seam where my two loves met and driven his oldest debt straight into it. I didn't speak. I want that recorded, in case Lena ever reads this and wonders why I sat silent while she took the man who raised me apart with the truth. I said nothing because there was nothing to say that wasn't a betrayal of someone. Silence was the only loyalty I had left that didn't cost the other one everything. So I sat in my dead father's kitchen and let the two halves of my heart finish their terrible arithmetic without me, because for once in my managing, scheming, controlling life, there was no door to find and no number to pay. Only the two people I loved and the harbor between them. It's you. You're the leverage, Nico. You don't have a thing Greco caught you doing. You have my father. Greco owns you because you're the one who helped him kill Aldo Russo, and he's owned you with it every day since. And you have been sitting at this family's table for 3 years, passing the bread to the daughter of the man you put in the harbor. Nico closed his eyes. Yes, he said. To be continued. That was episode 15 of Empire of Ashes. If this one has its hooks in you, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus Dario POV bonus scenes are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
Mia.
Thank you for listening.